guys, Chia here, back for another segment with Christian of Martin's Cantina.
Yeah.
So how do they go from the grocery business to the restaurant business?
So so we're gonna talk about basically from like the 80s all the way to 2009 when we opened the restaurant.
Okay.
So what is that, like 30 years, right?
Yes,
Like 30
wow.
years. So in those 30 years, there was no less than that, right? So yeah, well, 80. So we were born in the late 80s, right? But they were, they got married in 82, I believe. So when you go through that time frame, we had a grocery store, which we had for probably about 8 years or 10 years. That's what we spent our early childhood in the market and with my dad. My dad ends up selling the grocery store when we're in like middle school, high school. He ends up selling the grocery store along with this modern day Amazon business, and he sells that.
Like Instacart.
Instacart, right? That's what it is, Instacart. So he sells that, and we actually, now we're in like the 90s, like early 90s, 95. And my dad actually buys a restaurant right here on La Brea, which is a seafood. We turned it into a seafood restaurant, but it's right next to the car wash, right here on La Brea.
La Brea and like Alviso down there?
La Brea and like Florence.
Oh, okay.
So there's that big car wash there.
Side,
So that car wash, I think it still exists, a little restaurant, but in the 90s, my dad that was the first dive into a restaurant. It was kind of literally a hole in the wall. There was no tables to sit down. It was kind of like bar stool seating, and everything was to go. You had a little bit of area to sit down, and that was like our first dive into a restaurant, where now instead of going to the grocery store, we have to go to the restaurant. And so that's where, as a family, we got our first introduction into the whole restaurant thing. And my mom, people have always loved my mom's cooking and my dad's cooking. So and the reason why in the market, I'm gonna go back a little bit, but in the market, it was a kind of a meat market too. So my mom would do a lot of sandwiches, and they would sell meat, and so she would tortas to be exactly tortas. So my mom would like do a lot of this in the market, and she'd put it in my dad's van, and then when my dad would go out, he would sell that. And guys would come to the market, and my mom had like a meal plan. So like construction workers or your everyday kind of mechanics would come, and they'd pay like $50, for example, or $100. And my mom would cook them meals throughout the whole week, and then they'd come and pick up their food. So that was kind of like already something that we're looking at, where some people were responding well to their food. So that's in the 90s. In the mid 90s, we go to this, we called it La Bahia. So La Bahia was kind of a seafood concept of restaurant. We sold mariscos and ceviche and cocteles and tacos and burritos and all that. We did that for about 5 years, and then one of my uncles actually ended up buying it, and we started getting into limousines. So my mom bought. So now we're in the 2000s, and
entrepreneurs.
Now we're in limousines. So we had like at one point right there on Fairview, once I had like 5 limos parked, and that's what we did. Our job was to now vacuum the limos. There was no car washes. Like we were the car wash. My mom would say, "Hey, you're gonna clean the cars." So we would clean the cars for quinceañeras, weddings, birthdays, all of
graduations,
that. Graduations. So my mom would drive the limousines, and so they were doing that for a couple years, and then they ended up selling the limousines. And then this was like in the 2000s, early like 2000, we kind of got into a little bit of a financial hardship, like most families. I think that got a little difficult, and we did a little bit of everything. My mom was working at Home Depot as a vendor along with my dad, and then they were also like doing stuff on the side. We would do a lot of things on the side, but at that time it was kind of dependent on, for the first time, they kind of left behind the entrepreneur stuff and went into kind of like a
consistent 9 to 5.
A job, but then they were doing this other stuff on the side. So we were doing construction. So then me and my dad started doing, and that's where I come in with the plants. So I met a vendor that would sell plants to Home Depot, and when I would go help my mom, I talked to the vendor and said, "Hey, can you sell these plants?" He says, "Yeah." So I would buy plants from him, and I would sell them like on Slauson before you get to the Home Depot, like on a Saturday morning with a big old sign. And if someone's watching this, they call the cops on me a couple times. Get this guy out of here. You're disturbing the neighborhood. but it was very it was very rewarding, and something that was the first time of me kind of looking back and seeing my parents' entrepreneurial skills and putting them to test on my own. And the best part about that was my parents were so supportive, right? Like, hey, you want to do that? Go ahead. So I would sell plants on the weekends and do all that. And then you fast forward to 2008 when we're all out of high school at this point, including my 17-year-old brother. We're all out of high school, and a little bit out of high school. Probably I think my youngest one was like 20. My youngest brother, and we decided. My dad says, "Okay, now let's do a restaurant." Everybody's grown enough, we can all help. But the only problem with that is that the economy was horrible. we were just coming off of a recession. I don't know if you remember the political kind of ambiance at the time.
Turmoil,
It was a lot of the war, and I think that when President Obama was coming into office around the time, and it was kind of like a lot of uncertainty at that time with what is the financial situation in this country. People were losing homes left and right. It was really bad. So that's when we said, let's get this little restaurant. It was a hole in the wall on 64th and La Brea. You could probably sit like maybe 20 people, and but it was like, let's do it. Let's open up a restaurant, and that's how, we started off with maybe 2 employees, and everybody else was family. So my mom, my dad, and we all had kind of our day job. And when you weren't doing your day job, you were at the restaurant. So that's kind of how in 2009, December 21st of 2009 was the first day we opened our doors to Fiesta Martin Mexican Grill. And that's kind of how it was born. So it was like all of this kind of like years of kind of like entrepreneurship and failures and tribulations and some successes here. And in 2009, it kind of all came together and say, let's do this as a team. Let's see what happens. And we went into it with so much uncertainty and just said, maybe we could just sell $100 a day. That would be $3,000. We can pay the rent. And that was like, that was our idea.
Minimum goal,
like let's just do that. And so we invited our friends and family to come out, and we never looked back. Sometimes people ask you, did you ever imagine? No, like we never in a million years thought that, from 2009 to 2023, we look back and have 6 restaurants. That was never the goal. The goal was just to sell $100 a day and pay the rent and have a business that we can kind of, be in the community. And it was born from this idea. The people of Inglewood remember, I think the restaurant we're sitting today, it used to be a Los Ponchos. So it was it was a restaurant that's been around for many years in the city. I think it was the people in town, if you will, was like Los Ponchos. There was Acosta Tacos, which at the time was already closing their doors. So when you go on this side of town, so we grew up on Fairview, which is kind of like North Inglewood, near North Inglewood Park and all that. And anywhere going up in that area, there was very little like places to find a wet burrito and enchiladas and tacos. And so when growing up on Fairview, it was kind of like there was not a place that you can go. And outside of a couple of places that I mentioned, like there was not a lot of places to go and get Mexican food. So it kind of was born from this idea that like, hey, we want to serve our community. We want something to, we're all old enough to kind of work. Let's do something in our community, and let's kind of get my parents just cooking in here and see how people respond to it. And that's kind of how it all it all started, and never looked back after that.
No chef school, none of that.
None of that.
Stuff.
Unfortunately,
just
not.
Some good home cooks with vision.
Exactly. And it's crazy that that's all it takes sometimes, right? My respects to the people that study to be chefs. I think that's a phenomenal trade. In fact, my youngest brother, who's 17 now, wants to go to culinary school. And that's and we are completely open to that idea because we know that the knowledge he's going to bring back to us, because you do it at a level and you kind of do it so much now, you learn throughout the years, but there's a particular unique set of skills that a school kind of will give you. And if you can mix that with the experience, I think you have a great recipe. But yes, to answer your question, it was just mom and dad's cooking, and really, I don't want to give credit to the people that worked with us throughout these years that have contributed their kind of feedback and success. Our menu doesn't look nothing like when it first started. And I mean, as much as we did a lot of work, it was also a lot of our staff, right? That you know, a lot of them are still with us today.
Wow.
Even from the beginning, we have employees that have been with us for 10 plus years.
Wow.
A lot of them.
Wow.
But you know, even the ones that have been gone, you know, everybody has always contributed a little bit to this Martine brand now. So, you know, it's a lot of just putting pieces together and seeing, does this work? Does this work? Change that, and so it very much is a family and team contribution.